Good morning, everybody. This is John Shutsky, of course, from BSE 308, Career Management for Engineers, and we're going to continue our video series here. We have a longtime speaker, also a former instructor of this particular course, although it had a different number back in the day, Dr. Richard Straub. And just a really quick little introduction before we start talking. Dr. Straub is recently retired from the College of Ag and Life Sciences, where he was a senior associate dean, also was very involved in the department, a faculty member in the department. Dr. Straub, for how long?
41 years.
41 years. You were a department chair, a machinery systems faculty member. I've actually known you, and I think you know this, since I came to Minnesota back in 1990. I knew of you. And a lot of your colleagues who were in the department at the time. But I just want to say something, Dr. Straub, if I'm just going to call you that, okay? Dr. Straub was very instrumental in my family's coming to the state of Wisconsin. We were on the fence. I had been on the faculty in Minnesota for about 18 years. We came over. I was actually contemplating a job offer, and the hospitality you showed, I'm sure you remember, you took my two kids who were quite young at the time to a Badger football game. And it was actually that particular event that sold us on coming to Wisconsin.
Well, so thank you.
Your hospitality, and then also just instrumental in kind of getting me integrated into the department. And then obviously we worked for a number of years together in the dean's office. And you're a great problem solver and just a really great person. So thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction.
What I'd like to do is we're going to flip on over to our slides. Dr. Straub will be talking about, among other things, the professional registration process. And I think also you're a guy who has lots of words of wisdom for the students. So look forward to your conversation here today.
All right. Thank you, John. As John indicated, I have been a faculty member for over 40 years at the University of Wisconsin. For most of that time, I was a licensed professional engineer. I still am a licensed professional engineer, although I will admit I'm not sure if I will re-register or not when my current licensure goes up. I've had a 40-plus year career. At some point, you want to put your energy in other areas, and I'm certainly continuing to work with the university and the department and helping them with some things. I'm active with 4-H and some fairs and other things, and I'm not so sure that I will continue my registration, but I think it's been a valuable asset for me over my career, and I certainly am going to encourage you to consider that as part of your career at the university. So why would one become a professional engineer? And I think there's a variety of reasons to do that. Some of these may be a bit redundant, but I think they're certainly valid. Certainly the first is it's going to help you earn your client or your employer's trust. It certainly demonstrates a level of responsibility and expertise that you've taken on, that you're willing to take on more in order to do that. That certainly demands some respect from those you work with, your employer, those that you're serving. From a personal standpoint, it's an aspect of pride or accomplishment, just like if you complete a marathon or something of that nature. It's something you've done and worked for. It provides quality assurance for your work that others may not have. Part of the registration process is there's continued ethics training, and it demands a high standard of ethics. And I don't know if you've had your ethics lecture here or discussion in 308 yet, but I'm certainly sure that's going to be part of the course. In many cases, it will increase your earning power, or certainly increases opportunity for earning, as I'll talk about maybe a little bit later in terms of my own career. In addition, it allows you to do certain government-related work that otherwise you may not be able to do, because many construction projects of things like that, buildings, roads, things of that nature, require a PE stamp. It allows you to do consulting work and license and market yourself as an engineer. And something I think people don't always think about, it provides insurance for future opportunities. And I'd really like to stress that. I talked about my career here at the university being over 40 years. Today, we're seeing young people changing jobs much more frequently. I think jobs are much less stable than they have been in the past. You might be downsized out of a company. My nephew, who's a mechanical engineer, was recently downsized out of a petroleum related company because of an acquisition, and he's looking for a job right now. So when that sort of thing happens, if you are a licensed professional engineer, it actually allows you to market your services to others, because you carry that that licensure as part of your pedigree, so to speak. And the other thing it does, it ensures that you're going to have continued professional development throughout your career. And some of you may get that through your employers, but as part of your PE, there is a requirement for continuing professional development, and it ensures that you're going to be current in terms of the things that's going on. And that can help you with your employer in terms of advancement, in terms of the type of position you might have, in terms of leadership positions with your company. As I've talked about, in some jurisdictions, if you're going to say you're an engineer, you have to be licensed to use that title. As I've already alluded to, if work requires an engineer's stamp on it, sort of technical documentation, whether it be a plan for a building or a plan for a road or something like that, it allows you to do that. I can again reflect back on my career, but in a circumstance where we had a building acquisition with the state of Wisconsin, and through an oversight by the state, plans were accepted without a engineer's stamp, which was technically a requirement. We built a dairy barn up at the Arlington station that was for about 100 cows. This was in about 2000 when I was director of the Ag Research Station system. And we had a large snowstorm that January, and the barn collapsed. And when they went back, they found out that the plans had been accepted without a stamp by a PE, which probably would have prevented that, because the person who designed the barn clearly didn't have the competency to design for the type of snow loads we have here in Wisconsin.
I was smiling because I can hear you're speaking of livestock. I can hear your dog back in the background, perhaps.
Well, my dog's actually out in the garage. I thought she would. I thought that would.
It's actually fine. It makes it sound much more authentic, and I like it. So.
All right.
I did have to ask,
we can go on to the next slide.
Could I just ask you a question on this
Sure.
first bullet, when you talk about jurisdictions, is that typically like a state level jurisdiction, or?
Typically here in the U.S., that would be a state level jurisdiction. Yes.
And do you see a lot of variation from state to state?
I really haven't dug into that. I think there is some variation from state to state. In the past, there's been also some variations relative to continuing professional development, as I'll talk about, from state to state. So I think that is very much a state by state issue that one might have.
Okay.
The purpose of licensure really is to basically protect the well-being of the public and the interest of the public, making sure that buildings, roads, other projects are adequately designed, making sure that the individual who does other work for you is of a certain competency level. Licensure also defines the process by which one becomes an engineer, so that they can provide those professional services to the public. So licensure is a process, but it has a purpose to it, basically to protect the well-being of those who use those services. Licensure actually has some beginnings in the agricultural roots. Wyoming, ironically, was the first state, while it's a small state in a western state, not very heavily populated, it was the first state to require licensures in 1907. And it did it around an issue that falls right into the ballpark of our natural resource and water and environmental engineers. At that time, they were getting permits for water use of the state waters, and they were getting submissions that were of poor quality or not based on engineering calculations. So at that time, Wyoming required licensures. By 1947, all of the 48 states at that time were licensed, the last one being actually a neighboring state, Montana. And today, with the addition of Alaska and Hawaii, we still require registration in all 50 our states here in the U.S.
I just have to say, I find that so interesting because if you think now where we're at here in 2020 or beyond, Wyoming is actually one of the lesser regulated states. And to know that it was kind of agriculture and water were kind of at the forefront of that is interesting to me.
That was quite interesting to me. I expected it was as a result of a failure of a building or a bridge or something of that nature. But
Yeah,
as I
maybe in a
dug into
city
that to find out that it had an agricultural basis was a biological basis was quite interesting. We're going to talk a little bit about what professional registration is. One of the things that helps is an ABET accredited engineering degree. It's not a requirement. Is one thing you will have when you graduate from the BSE department. We are accredited. In addition to that, beyond that, one will take the fundamentals of engineering exam, something that you will take to graduate as a senior. We do require that. The reason we require it is that we want to evaluate the competencies which you're gaining through your program, and it provides a great feedback for us to do that. It also sets you on a course to become a PE if you so desire to follow up on that, which again, I would encourage you to do. We do not require you to pass the exam. In spite of that, I'm going to encourage you again to, study for it, do as well as you can, because passing it will open the door for other opportunities that you have. You have to complete 4 years of professional experience. So you take the exam, you work out in the engineering profession for 4 years, and then you have to take a second exam called the professional engineer's exam, which again includes engineering competency as well as questions regarding to ethics in engineering. And passing that exam at that point with the 4 years of professional experience, and it requires references. Actually, I didn't put that in here. It requires references from other engineers who have witnessed your work. So I've attested to a number of people who I've worked with to attest to the quality of the work that they've done. So it's going to be good in your state of licensure, although in many states today, there's going to be reciprocity or comity. Wisconsin in the past did not have reciprocity with as many states as others around us because we didn't have as stringent continuing professional development requirements, but that has changed in the last 5 or 8 years. And I think Wisconsin's licensure would get reciprocity in most states probably today.
I think one of the questions that's come up when we've presented this in past years from students have wondered about the requirements for the 4 years. I think the specific question has been, if I've done an internship or a co-op, would that count toward my 4 years? And I think we discussed this a couple days ago. You said most likely no, this is 4 years required after receiving your bachelor's degree. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. I think one could ask. I will also note you will get some, if you decide to go on for a master's exam or a PhD, they will give you some engineering experience as part of that if it's in an engineering program. So I think I gained an extra year of experience for my master's degree and an extra year of experience for my PhD when I attained those in the state of Wisconsin. So you can ask, but as I said, I think if those things occurred prior to your degree, I believe they would not count in terms of professional experience.
Sure.
I talked about continuing professional development requirements for Wisconsin. We require 30 hours, as most states do, of continuing education in every 2-year period. So you have to self-certify that. There's not a form you send out. You just have to maintain a record of that if it's questioned and be willing to be able to provide that. As part of that 30 hours, it requires that you have 2 hours of ethics training as well. So and this comes back to the code of conduct for engineers, where ethics is a big part of that, which is part of the licensure process. The code of conduct, I don't know, John, when you talk about ethics, have you done that yet, or will you show them the engineer's code of conduct as part of that?
Yeah, good question. So in this particular semester that we're in, actually ethics will come next. For students who might watch this in a future semester, they may or may not have already had it. But as you know, because I inherited this class from you, yeah, we do include a full, like a 1-hour conversation about ethics. I'd also encourage students that there are entire like workshops and courses on ethics. And, you know, it's interesting because a lot of those courses are based on case studies. There's a lot of things that have happened in history where unethical behavior of engineers has resulted in catastrophe or bridges collapse and things like that. So yeah, we'll definitely be covering that here. And also, Dick, we have in BSE 508, which is where I teach senior design. I actually talk a lot about the code of ethics because safety, a big part of safety engineering is really rooted in that code of ethics. And you've already mentioned we do this kind of stuff to protect the public from harm.
Correct. So to take the fundamentals of engineering exam, you need to be a senior in an ABET accredited program, which you will be or are, depending where you are at this point in time in your educational process. Or there is an out if you're not in an ABET accredited program, and that is that you can take the fundamentals of engineering exam if you have an additional 4 years of engineering experience. This does not qualify for the 4 years of experience that one would have to have for the PE. So this is in lieu of the ABET accredited engineering requirement. So if I don't have an ABET accredited degree, I need to have 8 years of engineering, total engineering experience to become a PE. And there's some ability to have a combination of that based on the program that you went through. So they might require that you only have 2 years of engineering experience based on the type of program that one had as an undergraduate, or the type of program one had as an undergraduate.
For the vast majority of students, though, they'll fall underneath that first bullet.
Everybody through our program would fall under that first bullet. All of our programs at UW-Madison would fall under that bullet. We're all ABET accredited.
Yep.
The exam itself contains about 110 multiple choice questions. It is about a 6-hour long exam. Today it's an online exam, which has changed over time, as we'll allude to again later. That 6 hours is broken up. There's a non-disclosure agreement and a tutorial that takes about 8 to 10 minutes. The exam itself is about 5.5 hours, 5 hours, 20 minutes is what the literature says. It includes a scheduled break for lunch or refreshments. And then there's a brief survey at the end in terms of the exam. And again, as I said, the exam itself, we could advance the slide.
Can I just ask?
Sure.
You've got a lunch break in here, or a scheduled break. That's really important that you eat before you go to feed your brain, because you're going to need to do a lot of thinking and a lot of memory work, and then also making sure that you bring something with you to eat and drink some water as well.
And beyond that, I'd say one also wants to make sure one's had a good night's sleep the night before. You wouldn't want to do this after a night of going out with your buddies or friends. You want to make sure you're well rested, well hydrated, got some snacks and food so that you have the energy to do well on the exam. The FE exam, there's seven opportunities in terms of subject areas for the FE exam. We recommend that most of our students should take the other disciplines exam. We know that there are some of our students who take the civil or the mechanical exam. They actually tend to do not as well than the other exams. So I'm going to encourage you to do that, and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about that later on. But there is a choice of exams that one can take. This is a change. When I took it was not called the Fundamentals of Engineering exam. When I took it, it was called the Engineer and Training exam. So it's just a name change, but at that time, everybody took the same exam. There was no differentiation between the various subdisciplines.
If you get out into the workplace and you have if you've taken the FE and you've passed it, and you might have a boss or a supervisor who's like our age, they will often refer to it still as the EIT. So just make sure that you help clarify that confusion in the future.
The other thing, regardless of what exam you take for the FE, you can take any exam for the PE later on. So if you take the other disciplines exam and by your career path, you're working more in the mechanical or the civil engineering area and want to take that PE exam, you can do that later on. But as I said, I'll show you some numbers, and our students tend to do better on the other disciplines exam when they take it. In terms of references, there is only one allowed references for the FE exam. This is provided by the NCEES, which is a National Council of Examiners for Engineers and Surveyors. They actually administer the FE exam, and they will provide you an online reference handbook that you can use during the exam. It's going to be provided online. You can also purchase it beforehand if you want as a hard copy, or download it when you register to take the FE exam.
We do have that linked in the 308 Canvas website, and I will make sure that it's also right there, easily referenced within your module on Canvas, so that we strongly encourage people for any of the review, and even like some of your classes, there might be some guidance in there that could be helpful. I know when we did engineering economics in 508 recently, some of the students referred to chunks of that.
Changes have occurred over time. Again, we'll talk about a little bit more about some others later on, but today this is a computer-based exam, so you're not tied to taking it at certain points during the year. This was actually quite a stumbling block for many years for us, because it was only offered periodically, and if a student missed it, they couldn't make it up. They would have to wait another 6 months before the next offering of the exam. So that very often delayed a student's graduation. That is no longer the case. The pencil and paper exams are a thing of the past. In addition to that, there's computer-based training that occurs. So you're going to be able to go on to the NCEES website, and you're going to be able to take a practice exam, which is going to simulate what the actual exam will look like as well, in terms of the format, the style, and things of that nature. The exam does require a fee of $175. That's payable directly to the NCEES during the registration process. And you're going to get your results about 7 to 10 days after you complete or take the exam. So there's a fairly rapid turnaround in terms of getting the results back.
Since this is administered by computer, do you have any idea why they don't provide a little bit more rapid feedback? I mean, I know if it was graded by hand, it could take weeks or even months, but why do you not get a turnaround in like 24 hours? Any idea?
I can't really answer that.
It may be audited by a real human being in some cases, just to make sure. I don't know for sure either.
Well, and there's the bureaucracy of documenting and doing things like that. It just sometimes just takes a while to turn some of those things around. I've got my next several slides are going to talk about the pass rates in several different ways. Here's the pass rates by exam, and you see the other disciplines at the bottom, which we recommend our students take. It has one of the higher pass rates at about 81%. That's actually a number that's fairly typical of what our students would see, but the pass rates vary between the high 60s and that 81% in terms of the various discipline exams, whether it be starting with the chemical through the other disciplines that are shown here in this particular slide. We also have the pass rates by discipline of the people that are taking it. And our students would probably fall under the agricultural. It's agricultural and biological. That is the PE exam that I'll talk about a little bit later on. And you can see the pass rate there again is quite representative, about 82%. Again, quite a variation between the disciplines from the 60s up into the 90s in terms of the pass rates for the various disciplines of the students who take the exam. But our BSE agricultural engineering type students actually do quite well and represent themselves quite well in terms of how they show in terms of the results of the exam.
I just have to say, so 82%, that's roughly 1 in 5, means 1 in 5 don't make it. And from my experience these last 4 years, having been really involved in teaching in our BSE program, the students who don't pass it are often, it's not because the test was too tricky or that they just studied their butts off and somehow didn't do well. It's usually people who choose, like, I just got to take this because it's a formality. They don't have their head in it. The other thing is I found that the students who review that book, the booklet, the study guide, that again we'll link, they say, like, that it nailed it. So if you put the time and effort into it, there's a very high probability you're going to pass this exam, and that's only to your benefit.
Before we go on, I guess I'd say, well, you need to think of this as something that can open a door to future opportunities. I alluded to, it can do that. I can give you a real life example of a good friend of mine who was downsized out of an agricultural related manufacturing firm. They were acquired by a Canadian company, and he was going to be forced to move if he was going to stay with that particular company. He'd lived in his community for 35 years or so. He was well grounded there. His wife had a position in that community. He did not want to move to do that. He was able to extend his career because he was a PE. He went into private consulting and worked with the machinery industry and the food industry to offer them professional services. And that's something he would have not been able to do had he not had and maintained that PE throughout his career. So there is a real upside here to getting that PE in terms of if a situation like that occurs. And as I said, it's much more common today than I think it was in years past, that people are being downsized out of companies. There's acquisitions which force them to leave the company. Things happen around life. So it's a door you don't want to close.
Yeah, we typically in this class, and we had it earlier in the semester, Greg Markinet came in and talked about all the critical things he had done when he got downsized with Oscar Mayer when they were bought out by Kraft. And for him, a big part of it was keeping super current, having that network of people. So it all it all gets woven together for future success.
I'm gonna digress a little bit here, use my professorial authority, I guess, and just talk about, if you are downsized or if you have an event like that occurs in your career, you want to handle it professionally, because the way you handle that can determine whether you're going to have other doors that open for you or whether doors might reopen for you. Yeah. I can give you an example in terms of my own career. I was actually downsized out of an administrative position in our college, largely because of a disagreement with my superior, I would say, in terms of how we were conducting our business. That superior was fairly short-lived. I could have, at that point, I could have been quite negative about it. I could have done some things that might have showed some anger or whatever, but I tried to maintain a professional status. When that administrator left, I was actually asked to come back to a higher level position than I was when I left the administration, and they said, we need you back now. People recognize how you handle those situations, and you need to think about that, whether it be a failed interview or a job you didn't get, or if you're downsized out of a company, you never want to close that door. You want to handle it professionally in a positive way as you can, because you never know when that some opportunity might come back, and how you handle that previous situation will reflect on whether door is going to open or not for you.
So I'll give you just 100%. You handled things so well. Actually, you've been a role model for me in that, and you reinforced things other role models, including my own dad, have told me about. You just never, ever, ever burn a bridge through your language or actions, or even a hastily written email can come back and haunt you down the road.
You need to be very careful about what you put in emails, because they can't, you think that email is only going to one individual. You don't know where that email is going to end up. You need to be very careful and think about what you're going to put in a letter versus an email versus a personal conversation, because as John alluded to, those things can come back and haunt you very easily if they're not handled well. going back to where we were, the pass rate for our students for the other disciplines exam is around 82%. So it's consistent with the data you saw before, what other students are doing. I will say that for those students taking the ME or the CE exams, FE exam, the results tend to be lower. They tend to be in the low to mid 70%. So the department would really like to encourage you to take that other discipline exams. It's shown that our students do better when they take that. And as I alluded to before, it's not going to affect the exam that you take later on if you're taking the PE exam in any way. But our students have a much better track record in the other disciplines exam than they do in the specific CE or ME exams in terms of the fundamentals of engineering.
I'd like to just reinforce that a little bit, because I think it's a little bit confusing, because the number of it's probably the pass rate for the ME exam overall is actually high. I think it was 90% on one of those previous slides, but the vast majority of people who are taking that and getting the 90% rate are probably MEs. And I've had some students who are machinery systems, and they say like somehow it's going to weaken their case if they take the more general exam. They really want to do the ME one, but I guess it's going to have equal value. The route that you take, especially as the FE, is not going to really matter down the road.
No, you're going to be listed as an engineer in training. That is still a term that's in use. It just shows that you passed the FE exam. It doesn't designate which exam you passed. Mm-hmm. So there's some real benefit for you students in BSE to take that other discipline exam, and I really want to encourage you to consider that as you sign up and take that exam.
Let me just say one other thing really quick here. So some of the students will actually be taking or a lot of our students will be taking this in the fall. And I just want to remind you, this material, I will have access to. So if you don't download the PowerPoint that's associated with this, but you kind of remember the video and you want to come back and check back in with me in the fall, we can remind you of a few of these like facts that are really quite important to be successful.
Moving on, if you've taken the FE exam and you passed it and you've got your 4 years of engineering experience, you do have a number of different PE exams you can take. There's enough of them. I didn't put them on just one slide to keep the font size large here. There is one for agricultural and biological engineering. You don't have to take that. If you have worked in another area that you feel is more aligned with civil or mechanical, you have that option at that point, but certainly would encourage you heavily to think about that agricultural and biological engineering exam. I'll also talk about some support for that, which you can get through your profession. And if you go to the
next one, okay.
Next one here, the pass rates for FE exams, about on average about 66%, about 2 out of 3 students pass. The agricultural and biological average is just slightly higher than that, but consistent with that number for the all exam average, about 69%. So,
and just so that we're clear, this is for the PE. So this would be post. You've got your FE, you've got your 4 years of experience. Now you are motivated and you want to get your PE. This would be the next.
This is the PE, the professional engineer's exam. This is the last step, or one of the last steps in obtaining licensures. I had a slide that's out of place, so let's just skip over this. I apologize for that. I will also say that what I tell you today may change tomorrow. There's been a lot of changes over the years. We alluded to the last pencil exam that occurred about 7 years ago in 2013. So that was one change. Going to the computer exams. There have been some rules that were put in place and then rescinded. In the about 20 or about 5 years ago, they were going to require a master's degree to have a professional engineer's degree. That was put in place. It was supposed to go into effect this year. And that rule stood for about 1.5 years or 2 years. And then they thought about it and they stepped back and they said, no, we're going to rescind that. That's no longer the case. So, you know, when I gave this talk 5 years ago, I was telling students they might have to think about a master's degree in order to become a licensed professional engineer. That has gone by the wayside, thankfully, because I think that was a bad change. There have been a number of other format changes over time. We talked about the name change. When I took again, it was EIT exam and the PE exam, I actually took them on consecutive days.
So lots of change. So we may have
at that time. I took that on one day. I came back the next day and I took the PE exam, which was a pretty grueling 2.
So you have locked up. I am going to temporarily pause. Okay, so we are back recording. Let me just double check that. So again, sorry for the little glitch. We're making do with the technology that we have here. Dr. Straub was in the process of talking a little bit about how back in the day you took exams on, you said on back-to-back days.
Back-to-back days in June. I took the 8-hour EIT exam one day, the 8-hour PE exam the next day. I remember it well because when I came out, I don't know if you heard this or not, I had a flat tire on my car. So I thought that it kind of capped 2 long days with not such a good occurrence. But in the end, I passed both of them. And then later on, when I had attained my engineering experience, I became a PE, and I've been a PE for most of my career. I think I became a PE in 1981 or 1982. When I finished after I finished my PhD and had started to join the faculty at UW-Madison.
Yep. All right.
So I also want to talk a little bit about ASABE support and involvement. I alluded to some advantages for taking the Ag and Biological Engineering PE exam if you so desire. One of the things that our professional society does that they will actually pay $450 towards your registration fee and for any expenses you have. And they do that each year for up to 30 individuals. The deadline for applying for this is actually passed for this year. It usually occurs early in the year in January to apply for funding for that particular year. But this has been an ongoing commitment by our society to support people that want to become professional engineers. And if you don't pass the exam, you will also pay $150 the next time you try to retake it. So that's a nice support by your professional society, and that is only one of the things that they will do. If you go on to the next slide, John.
If I could just pause here for just a moment, because I know that this question will come up in the fall. Whatever semester people are watching this, they'll come back to me and they'll want to know more about this. But again, this is the $450 subsidy or help that you get from ASAB is only for the PE exam and not for the FE exam.
This is only for the PE exam, yes, the professional engineers exam that one would take. They provide additional educational opportunities as well they will help you prepare for the PE exam. They do this through mentoring. They'll get you connected with a mentor who's taken the exam and will sort of work with you to make sure you know how to study for it. They provide continuing education training courses that they will have. That's also beneficial, as you need to have continued training throughout your licensure period, because the CPDs are going to be available through your professional society. And the last thing they do is they always offer ethics training as part of their international meetings. So I've been able to get an hour to 2 hours of ethics training every time I go to an ASAB international meeting as part of that. And so I think they're great opportunities. And beyond that, there's networking.
Yeah. Before I go on to the next slide, could I just, I know that this comes up with students. They get into the early part or the middle part of their senior year, and then they start to say like, oh, I've seen all of my friends and other people in the BSE program become part, whether it's ASABE or mechanical, or, we have students who are non-BSE, and they have these regrets. I want to just say, from the standpoint of my career, I was one of those students. I did not join until the middle half of my senior year. I decided to jump in with both feet, and it's never too late. If you choose to not join as a student, so be it. But it's never too late to join your professional society. And Dick, I can't express enough how, from a networking perspective, and I served on committees, and like, the exposure that I got through ASABE has been absolutely invaluable to me. And it's probably added hundreds of thousands of dollars to my total career income. So just really important for people.
And I certainly agree with that. I think the networking is so, before we go on to the last slide, I think the networking is so important. I would really encourage students to be professionally active with ASABE, or if not with that organization, with some other, whether it be SAE or the ME organization or civil engineering organization. The networking that you have there, I can virtually go to any equipment company in North America, many of them in the world, and I know people because of my involvement with ASAB. And that is not only true of the agricultural companies that you might think of and that I might have worked with, but I can go to Polaris, I can go to Cummins, I can go to Caterpillar, I can go to Ford, and I know people who I've met through ASAB or other professional organizations that are working there and have contacts. General Motors, it's great. There's great networking opportunities that you're going to get by having that. And again, as you go through your career and you might want to change jobs, or you need a job or something like that, to have those networking, that network set up for you out there, I think is just invaluable. So I would really encourage you to, consider professional involvement as part of your career development as when you leave the university. I think you will have a presentation by a couple of young professionals coming up here, and I think they're going to attest to what it has meant for them in terms of their own careers. So I really will encourage you to do that. And you see some of that here with ASABE in terms of the support they're simply providing for the PE, but there's support that goes on well beyond that.
And just a real quick note, we continue to have Shane and Naomi be part of this class. We also had a presentation that was just on techniques of networking, and she emphasized the importance of this kind of thing. The other thing, I think sometimes as young engineers, I did as a student, you make the mistake of thinking that networking is about, or going to a national meeting. My first national meeting was actually here in Madison, I think in 82. I was a little bit afraid to go. I was thinking, I'm not a schmoozer. I'm not one of those guys that can walk around with the hors d'oeuvres and the snacks and talk and chat with everybody. That was a little bit out of my comfort zone. But what I found real networking is about working together on projects and standards and committees. And it's like real work that ends up really influencing the future of the industry. So think broadly when you think about networking and about these kinds of activities.
Well, I said I fully support that. The other thing that the ASABE does is they actually have something called PEI, the Professional Engineers Institute, basically to sort of promote professional engineers, to promote the profession, to enhance the credibility of the profession in the PE community. And again, I believe both Naomi and Shane are part of the PEI group through ASABE. But again, that's an ongoing subset within the society that's really there to promote licensure and the stature of agricultural and biological engineers as professional engineers. So a lot of support by our society. A lady by the name of Jean Walsh is the contact for PEI. If you have some questions about that, you can reach her through the ASAB website or a directory that's online if you had some questions about that. But I'm sure Jean would be very willing to answer questions about that if you had some questions. And I think that really concludes my presentation. I've offered here my email or my cell phone. I check those on a regular basis. I'm good with either voice or text messages. If you have questions about this or about my own experience with licensure, or if you have some questions you'd like answered, I'd be glad to do that. So I'd encourage you to ask questions. When I was a full-time faculty member, what I always would tell students is there are no stupid questions except for the ones that don't get asked. It should be. So feel free to contact me if you do have some questions, and I'll be glad to talk with you or respond to you and through whatever mechanism you would prefer.
So I just want to say how kind it is, and I'm not surprised you would offer this, but especially to put your cell phone number up there. And I really do encourage our students. Dr. Straub is a super good guy, and I really do appreciate you doing this. We've actually been able to kind of nail down several of the questions I'd written down. It was mainly from last year when we did this presentation live, but there was one question, I told you about this the other night, and it was written by a student last year on their session summary sheet that they have to do during class, and they have to turn it in. And it was a long question, and it was basically, what happens to those who don't pass the FE? And I think it was like, came from a little bit of a place of fear. Did you want to speak at all to that? If you take that FE and you're one of those 1 in 5 who don't pass it, what happens to you?
I actually alluded to that very briefly in my presentation, but I'll go back there. And that is that you are just required to take the exam. It is not a requirement that you pass it in order to get your degree in the BSE department. As I said, it's the results of that exam are used as a feedback mechanism for us in terms of continual improvement of the curriculum. And we use it to help verify that we're doing that for our ABET accreditation. So again, while there are no negative consequences if you don't pass it, I would encourage you to take that exam seriously and try to pass it, because I think it can really open future doors for you that you might not appreciate at this point in time.
Well, and how much encouragement would you give people to use it as a learning opportunity, and at some point a few months down the road jump right back on the horse and try it again?
Oh, I would say I think that's good advice. I think, as I said, I think moving towards licensure is a nice insurance policy that you'll have as young professionals in terms of your career. You know, very frankly, in the latter half of my career, I did not use my PE very much. I was very heavily involved with administration at the university. I was department chair twice. I was in the dean's office couple times in different roles. I was director of the Ag Research Stations Network for the college. So I was heavily engulfed in administration as well as trying to be a faculty member. But early on in my career, it offered opportunities for me to do some consulting. It offered me the opportunity to be an expert witness in some cases. I did some insurance work based on having a PE exam. So it did offer me an opportunity to generate some extra income beyond what I had at the university. I actually chose to invest that income back into the UW Foundation. And I think at some point, some of that will be available as a scholarship for students in our department. But if you don't want to do something like that, there's the ability to get some extra income because you are a PE that you might not otherwise be able to obtain because you don't have that competency credential.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time, your commitment, your passion for our profession, and especially for the department. I know the students really value everything you've done. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. And as I said, I certainly welcome any questions if students have them and be more than willing to have a discussion with them in whatever mode they choose to converse with me.
And he's serious about that. Thank you for watching.